If I were to ask you what you did last weekend, would you be able to remember? What if that weekend was 12 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 18 years ago, or 22 years ago? Would you always tell the story exactly the same way? Or would you maybe mix up and rememorize other details? It's possible too that depending on who you're talking to, you might tell the story different ways. You tell the story differently to your mom than you would to your best friend or to a complete stranger. Now, that way that memory works might be one of the explanations for why there are different accounts of Joseph Smith's first vision. Joseph Smith gives several accounts within his own lifetime, and every one of them tells a consistent story that he prayed and received a revelation from God, but they do have slightly different details. So let's take a minute and talk a little bit about the first vision and how it was recorded and written down by Joseph Smith. The earliest account of the first vision was written in 1832. The 1832 account of the first vision is the most unique account produced by Joseph Smith within his own lifetime. And even though it's the earliest account written, it's the last one that we actually find out about. The 1832 account was discovered in the 20th century in the church archives, and it was never published publicly within Joseph Smith's own lifetime. From internal evidence, it seems like it was probably written within the summer of 1832, around the time that D&C 85 was received, which told Joseph Smith to record a record. But there might be other things that led Joseph Smith to write down this account of the first vision. For instance, 1832 was a rough time for Joseph Smith. There were dissensions within the church. There were some people that were persecuting him. You might even recall that at the John Johnson farm, he was attacked by a mob and brutally tarred and feathered. Well, during this time, too, he was also asked to travel all the way to Missouri and meet with the saints there. And unfortunately, these meetings were very discouraging. On the way back, he had something else happen, which was the stagecoach he was riding in had a runaway, and he had to jump out of it to escape. Well, one of his friends, Noel K. Whitney, when he was jumping out of the stagecoach, had his pant leg caught on the door, and he fell and broke his leg in several places. This was near a little town called Greenville, Indiana. And though most of the people in the party elected to continue on to home, Joseph Smith decided to stay behind with Noel Whitney and make sure that he was okay and stay there until he was well enough to travel. Well, unfortunately, Joseph Smith didn't have a pleasant experience while he was staying in Greenville either. A lot of people there have heard of him and had heard of the things that he had revealed and mocked him for it. There may have even been an attempt on his life. Joseph Smith said that while he was eating his porridge for breakfast one morning, he felt sick suddenly and ran out of the yard and vomited violently. He later on believed that someone had placed poison in the porridge that was there. So everything's going wrong in his life, and he's trying to figure out why he's doing what he's doing. In the middle of this, he wrote a letter to his wife, Emma Smith, where he described to her some of the feelings he was having at this time. He said, "My situation is a very unpleasant one. Although I will endeavor to be contented, the Lord assisting me, I have visited a grove, which is just in the back of town, almost every day, where I can be secluded from any mortal, and there give vent to all the feelings of my heart in meditation and prayer. I have called to mind all the past moments of my life, and left to mourn and shed tears of sorrow for my folly in suffering the adversary of my soul to have had so much power as he had in times past." So Joseph is visiting this grove near Greenville and thinking about the past times in his life when he's given into temptation. But as the letter continues, it brightens. And Joseph Smith said, "But God is merciful. He has forgiven my sins, and I rejoice that he sendeth forth the Comforter unto as many believe and humbleth themselves before him. I will try to be contented with my lot, knowing that God is my friend. In him I shall find comfort. I have given my life into his hands, and I'm prepared to go at his call. I desire to be with Christ." Well, it's possible that during this time that he was staying in Greenville, Indiana, to bear up his own testimony, he decided to write down his past experience with God. It doesn't appear that this was intended for any audience other than maybe just Joseph Smith himself. When he got back to Kirtland, Ohio, he sat down with his friend Frederick G. Williams and recorded the 1832 account of the first vision. Now, if you read the 1832 account, you're going to notice a couple things. First of all, Joseph Smith mentions that he was searching for the right church from about the age of 12 years. He said, "At the age of 12 years, my mind became seriously impressed with regard to the all-important concerns for the welfare of my immortal soul, which led me to searching the scriptures. Thus, from the age of 12 years to 15, I pondered many things in my heart concerning the situation of the world of mankind." In other words, Joseph Smith just didn't walk into a church when he was 14 and then go home, read the Bible, and pray. He spent 2 to 3 years studying and searching and trying to find the right church before he came upon that scripture in the Epistle of James. When Joseph Smith did go into the woods and had his experience, he records it a little bit differently here than he does in the other accounts of the first vision. He said, "A pillar of light above the brightness of the sun at noonday came down from above and rested upon me. I was filled with the Spirit of God, and the Lord opened the heavens upon me, and I saw the Lord. He spake unto me, saying, Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee." Now, because Joseph Smith only refers to the Lord here, some people have said that at this point he might have believed that God and Jesus Christ were the same person. It's clear that he didn't. In a revelation that was received several months before he wrote down the 1832 account of the first vision, he specifically talks about the Father and the Son being separate individuals. In section 76 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which was received in February of 1832, Joseph said, "The Lord touched the eyes of our understandings, and they were opened, and the glory of the Lord shone round about, and we beheld the glory of the Son on the right hand of the Father, and received of his fullness, and saw the holy angels." So he believes that God and Jesus Christ are separate beings at this point. But the important thing to him was that the Lord had appeared to him and had forgiven of his sins. In that moment of discouragement, it was important for Joseph to know that the Lord knew who he was and that he had been forgiven of his sins. Now, the next major account that comes from Joseph Smith was received in 1835 and is recorded in Joseph Smith's journal. It was given to a man who claimed to be named Joshua and was a Jewish minister. Joshua actually turned out to be a man named Robert Matthews, also known as Joshua the Jewish prophet, also known as Matthias the prophet. Joshua, Robert, or Matthias, whatever name he was going by, visited Joseph Smith in his home in Kirtland and spoke with him for several days about his religious views. As he spoke, it became clear to Joseph Smith that he wasn't who he claimed he was, and that he could be Robert Matthews, this dangerous person that had been accused of murder in New York State. Joseph Smith eventually asked Matthias and Robert Matthews to leave his house, but before he did, he related to him the story of the first vision, as if to say, "I know that you're not a true prophet of God because I know and have met God." And not surprisingly, this is the first time that Joseph Smith mentions that before the powers of light came and spoke to him, there was an encounter with the powers of darkness. In the 1835 account, Joseph writes, "I called upon the Lord for the first time in the place above stated, or in other words, I made a fruitless attempt to pray. My tongue seemed to be swollen in my mouth so that I could not utter. I heard a noise behind me like some person walking towards me. I strove again to pray, but could not. The noise of walking seemed to draw nearer, and I sprung up on my feet." So before God and Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith, he acknowledges that Satan appeared to him and tried to stop him. Then, when he describes the appearance of God the Father and Jesus Christ, he said, "A personage appeared in the midst of this pillar of flame, which was soon spread all around, and yet nothing consumed. Another personage soon appeared like unto the first. He said unto me, Thy sins are forgiven. And he testified unto me that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." He also added, "I saw many angels in this vision." Joseph Smith not only saw God and Jesus Christ, but many angels. And sometimes artists have tried to capture this, like this is a painting by Anthony Sweat, where he depicts Satan, the Father, the Son, and also the angels that appeared in the first vision. Now, the version of the first vision that most people are familiar with is the 1838 account. This is the version that was placed into the scriptural canon and is found in the Pearl of Great Price today. This is usually the first account that people read, and that's the way it was supposed to be. This account was written specifically for the public. So the first account was written for Joseph Smith privately. The second is given to Robert Matthews, and this one is given to everybody. When Joseph Smith starts this account, he specifically says that he wrote it to disabuse the public mind and put all inquirers after truth into possession of the facts as they have transpired in relation to both myself and the church. And Joseph goes out of his way to make sure that you know what the public implications of the first vision are. So he doesn't mention that his sins were forgiven, but he does mention that the Lord told him to join none of the churches, for they were all wrong. The Lord also told him that the creeds were an abomination in his sight, and that Joseph would be called to do higher and holier things, and many other things were given to him which cannot be written at this time. This is the canonized account of the first vision, and the version that Joseph Smith really intended for every single person to read and know and understand. When Joseph Smith wrote this account of the first vision, he had you in mind and the searching you would make to try and find God, Jesus Christ, and the correct organization of their followers that existed on earth. Well, Joseph Smith recorded several more accounts within his lifetime, but the last one that he was in charge of writing was the 1842 account, better known as the Wentworth Letter. The Wentworth letter told basically the same story as the earlier accounts, including God and Jesus Christ appearing, Joseph Smith being told that none of the churches were true. There were a few minor details added. For instance, Joseph Smith said that his mind was taken away from the objects with which he was surrounded. He writes, "I was enwrapped in a heavenly vision, and two personages who exactly resembled each other in features and likeness surrounded me, and with a brilliant light which eclipsed the sun at noonday." There are other accounts of the first vision, some of which come from Joseph Smith's close friends, people that interviewed Joseph Smith that didn't know him at all, and some people that were new converts to the church. And these add some interesting details to the story. For instance, the apostle Orson Pratt said that Joseph, when he saw the pillar of light, expected to have seen the leaves and the boughs of the tree consumed as soon as the light came in contact with them. But perceiving that it did not produce that effect, he was encouraged with the hopes of being able to endure its presence. The apostle Orson Hyde added some interesting details to the demonic attack on Joseph Smith. He said that during that moment of darkness, Joseph's mind was filled with doubts, and it brought to mind all manner of inappropriate images to prevent him from obtaining the object of his endeavors. Now, which of these is most important? It's clear that the 1838 account is the one Joseph Smith wanted everyone to read. And yet each account of the first vision is important to understand, to know what was going on at that phase in Joseph Smith's life. Each one of them can have different meanings for you. When I was younger and a missionary and teaching people the gospel, the 1838 account mattered the most to me because I wanted people to know that our church was the true church. As I've grown a little bit older, the 1832 account has become more meaningful to me because it's so important for every single person to know that God knows who they are, that he knows their name, and that he's willing to forgive them of their sins. In fact, one of the things that the 1832 account and other accounts of the first vision help us to know was that Joseph wasn't just concerned with finding the true church, he was concerned with saving his own soul and receiving forgiveness from God. That the very first thing that was restored in the restoration, before we had priesthood or ordinances, was the power of God to forgive people for their sins, the atonement of Jesus Christ and his ability to allow us to overcome the things that we've done wrong and return back into his presence.